It looks to me as though you learned to love your prison. I guess you'd say you made it your own. Who knew that freedom's such a difficult decision? I bet you finally feel like you're home. Home.
Right in the center where the haves meet. You were proud of incremental half speeds. You were getting down in the AOC dance line, hands tied, nodding to the backbeat. You'll Secret Service dive in front of any representative alive, being asked for the very bare minimum. And you'll turn into that same kind of hard right villain you detested should we mention they could ever muster maximum. Cause liberal denial's such a lofty ataraxia, where morals take a back seat, not up in the cab, but in hidden panels made by federal human traffickers. If you trust the autopilot, then you're just a sleeping passenger, passively accepting that it isn't us the bastards serve, making peace with all the evil walking on this rancid earth, seeking unity with those who bound your hands at birth, glancing up at fascists on a bloody dais thinking they just need a push. Not a holy man, but I'm praying for a burning bush. Yeah, I know you'd love to look away, but love, you need to look. There are many massacres the country manufactured that will never make the books. Now here's your fucking hook.
It looks to me as though you learned to love your prison. I guess you'd say you made it your own. Who knew that freedom's such a difficult decision? I bet you finally feel like you're home.
Home on the range of excuses. Justify some fracking, water down pollution, paint a fresh coat of bipartisan charm over backroom collusion. Your consent is being manufactured by illusions, marketing executives in federal seclusion, working day and night to keep you just the side of lucid, and too beat down for calling out abuses. So fuck all these progressives who can speak on revolution once they empty all your powder out and spit on all your fuses. I prefer to judge a leader not by quality of tweets, but the six-figure book deals she chooses. Donors he betrays, and donors that he'd gladly take a bullet before he refuses. Slogans he reuses, buzzwords he produces, then he spews like mucus. Well, two can play at that. So here's the inner dialogue of every time I snap, and it's fine-tuned to ruthless, and saying politics are useless. Just a bunch of loose lips tweeting cute shit, power suits, taxpayer booze trips. Bunker at the ready when the shoe flips. And there will be no news clips. There will just be...
People still owe money. People still owe money. No.
It looks to me as though you learned to love your prison. I guess you'd say you made it your own. Who knew that freedom's such a difficult decision? I bet you finally feel like you're home. Home.
People still owe money. People still owe money.
Have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Who are these people?
It's us. We're these people.
I love that intro. I love that intro so much.
I'm here with a different co-host this time, Oz LaFave.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on.
Friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice. How are you, friend?
What's good? And you hear Nick say this all the time. The United States is the most propagandized country in the world.
We are so fucked, you guys. Again, I'm sorry for being cynical, but seriously, we're fucked. We are fucked. We are well and truly fucking fucked.
Just appreciate all the work that you do and the platforms that you all are providing.
Hey, you. Doing good. How are you guys doing?
And as independent media, we have a responsibility to be, we don't hide our bias, obviously, but we must stay true to the facts.
What's up, Pam?
Cheers and salutations. Welcome if you got them.
But I am here with a man that I've been waiting to talk to for the last couple of years, Nico House.
As an educator, what I would suggest is that, first of all, podcasts like these are made.
So you need to be an example for the people and for the future, knowing that your words can actually change the future.
What do you feel? What would Kwame Ture feel we would have to do?
Well, politics is every day of every minute. You have to be aware of what's going on. Not voting on one day, so the vote has never meant anything. So I'm not a Democrat.
See, I would call that guy the Black Obama.
No. The issues that we talk about, listen to us.
As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
INN News.
Yay, we did it. My button didn't work, but we did it. It's Wednesday. What's up, fam? It's INN News. Widget's waiting for chat. That's nice. I'm here with my co-host, as always, Collin Radix-Carter. How are you, Cape Bear? You doing all right?
I'm good, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go. I think that's all right. Yeah, I'm, not good, but hanging in there, I think is a fair way to say it.
Isn't that pretty much everyone else's too?
I kind of gave, I won't share it here, but I kind of shared with you earlier, like some drama
School
work
kid
stuff.
stuff.
Not really drama, but like just a lot of sadness in terms of reality of kids and what they have to go through. And
kids not having the best situations. Yeah, it's not fun, is it?
And and trying to advocate for them, and people don't listen to you. The people in power,
funny how that works,
who are meant to help them, are not listening and are not taking the necessary steps in order to help the people that they're in positions to help. So so it's just been a little frustrating and a little disappointing, but I'm here with you. So yeah, happy to be here, but work stuff is just a mess.
Feels like we just did one of these because we did just do one of these like Saturday,
Do one of what?
INN News,
Well, yeah, it's it was we just did it, but relatively speaking, not really. But yeah, I do understand what you mean. Like, just feeling like we just got off and now we're doing this again so soon. So
we got Driving Me Macy here. We got Angel Rivera's in the house. We got Robbie Burns. Little Robbie Burns. It was Burns night not that long ago, I do believe. People should have brought their haggis out and whatnot. Read some Scottish poetry. I don't know. Anyway, we brought some stories. Robbie Burns asks which Garvey, which, I'm sure you could let people know.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Burns night was Saturday.
Oh, yes.
So
nice. See, I know things.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not Scottish, but you're part Scottish, so
I'm very Scottish, in fact.
I mean, I think you should have known.
Yep. I'm in that Bruce family, dog. We're kind of like literal royalty over there, but whatever's. I'll accept my throne later. I'll come for it when I need to. So there's probably a bit of line of secession before me, though. But we can Games of Thrones our way in. We'll figure it out. But anyway, what'd you bring?
So these stories are kind of one update, and then the other one I kind of mentioned I wanted to talk about last week. So that's kind of more of a continuation of that. So last week we mentioned how Leonard Peltier was when not pardoned, but got clemency.
Clemency.
So basically house arrest till he dies.
Yeah.
But I mentioned last week how Marcus Garvey, who is, I would say, well known in, I would say probably not as well known here, but more especially in the Caribbean, given that he grew up in Jamaica. So he was one of our heroes essentially in the region. Biden pardoned him. Keep in mind he died the year my dad was born. So, which was in 1940.
Your dad was born. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so Biden pardoned him just before he walked out of the White House, which I thought, and shout out to DJ Joe Nice for actually mentioning this, because I wouldn't have known this hadn't he posted this on Instagram. By the way, follow him on Instagram at Joe Nice DJ if you so please do. Friend of the show. We hope to have him on soon. But I thought it was kind of interesting that this occurred, but not after kind of reading up and then this more, it does make sense as to why he would. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then later on, this is another story. Again, this is kind of more of an update. So this judge, this Ugandan judge that basically, who's part of the ICJ, who is part of the ICJ, who voted against, Israel committing genocide. We talked about that over a year ago. Well, update with her, she's now the president. And now, shout out to Max Blumenthal from the Gray Zone for reporting on this. We might have a reason as to why she voted in the way she did. And I should have caught on to this back then, and I might have mentioned this back then. But this judge is Ugandan. As many of you know, I lived in Uganda for a little bit in my younger days because I did a volunteer thing at a children's ministry at the time. There's actually a connection to what I have in regards to why she voted in this way. So this is a personal story for me in a lot of ways. So we're going to talk about that, but it's also going to kind of bring in some stuff we've mentioned before, especially Uganda and the role that Christianity plays in the country, well, on the continent. I would argue, I would argue, and then just how that's kind of perpetuated itself within the culture, in African culture, and not often in the best way. And we'll see the results of that, especially with this judge right here. So we'll talk about that later. And then what did you bring?
Well, I brought some stuff because there it is. I feel like we don't hear a lot from people actually in Gaza. We hear a lot of coverage about people in Gaza, but I wanted to get kind of direct from the source, So I found this article from the Institute for Palestinian Studies, which I got turned on to through an article Vanessa Beeley shared. So I thought it was a good pick about what their little slice of life from the area, and I also felt like we should just cover some actual good news if it's good at all. I'll have some caveats, of course, but there was some happiness that occurred over the last week in Gaza, so I figured we should at least showcase that a bit. That way it's not completely depressing news from over there, but so they got to return to North Gaza, so we're gonna showcase a bit of that. But that's what I brought. So oh no, oh no,
Sorry.
You're playing things. Oh no,
yeah,
you're doing it. What? So you ready? I'm ready. Well,
ready.
first, as people should always know, talking about these things is why we're demonetized. So you can scan this QR code or go to that co-fi.com/indienewsnetwork, link to the description. If you're in that live chat, you can put !donate. It's how we get super chats now. So if you want your message to come up on screen and Nancy Pelosi to ask who we are, you can just, give us a couple $1 dues here and there, help keep the lights on. We've got overhead to cover, Restream to pay for, and, Canva to pay for, and, so would be appreciative, but we get it. Not everyone can give, but if you do, you end up on this wall of fame here. Look at that. Look at how nice that is. Look at all those good people up there. You can use places like CashApp, Ko-fi, PayPal, Substack, all those places. We appreciate your support at. CashApp's probably the best option, but you know how it is.
Yeah. And just for complete transparency, we're looking to raise, and Indy, you can double check since I know you're in chat. We're looking to raise about $2,000. That will help support our colleagues in the network to get more tech so they can have better content, and some of the tech might be outdated / almost not working in a few cases. So we want to help them out to be able to get
just getting that overhead that we would like to cover for the year,
Right. So yeah, we want to be able to help our members be able to get the things that they need so they're able to continue streaming and then making content for the network as well as for you. So just being able to support them to do that. So anything, so any way that you can help support us in that, we will love it and we thank you for it. But as we always say, take care of yourselves, take care of your families, take care of your communities before you give to us. But if you have a little extra on hand, and especially given it's tax season, some of you might be getting a little refund. Maybe you might want to consider giving a little bit to us, perhaps, maybe just a little bit, even just $1. We would appreciate it. But
Money, please.
But again, as we know, money is tight for many of you all. So the free thing is liking, subscribing, and sharing our content to be able to possibly have YouTube push us up in the algorithm.
Yeah. All right. To our first story. This guy.
Yeah. Well, these men. But as I said earlier, so Leonard Peltier got a lot of press, I would say, generally within mainstream and even the independent media, which I think makes sense. But this kind of went under the radar. And as I said, shout out to DJ Joe Nice, friend of the network and to the show, who posted this on Instagram, I believe, last weekend. Well, the weekend before, the weekend, inauguration weekend.
Right.
So I didn't know about this until he did, and looking at it initially, I was kind of like, why would Biden pardon Marcus Garvey, of all people, especially given that the man has been dead for over 80 years. But in learning more about the reasonings why and the people behind it makes a ton of sense. And I think just another example of the symbolism that Black people get in terms of Democrats giving a nudge, nudge, wink, wink in terms to, hey, we support you and we love you, but not actually giving any tangibles that would really help Black people. So we're going to get into this, as I said, because in light of the Leonard Peltier clemency that he received, Marcus Garvey, who is a well-known Black activist, especially within the Caribbean, that's where my parents are from. My dad's Pan-African. Heard, about Marcus Garvey a ton growing up.
Yeah.
So
my Jamaican man.
So obviously, like he's definitely, like I wouldn't say one of my dad's heroes, but he's definitely someone that my dad does refer to a lot in as far as, Black nationalism, but Black in terms of the diaspora of Black people coming together, and like really having a collective sense of pride in who we are as a people.
Yeah, he's up there with Haile Selassie and all the Jamaican heroes.
Right. So which even in that sense is kind of like, why would Biden, and not to say people don't know of him here, but I don't think he gets as much.
Maybe Biden's secretly Rastafarian and we don't know.
Well, as I said, there is a reason
some
why
connections.
He did.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a reason why he did, and you could, and those of you in the chat will probably be able to figure this out if you watched our show long enough. But here's the thing with this show.
Sorry, we're not allowed to do Grace Jones. Gotcha.
Oh, I will say also to be somewhat transparent, I was going to use World Socialist website. There was an article that I saw about this pardon in relation to Garvey. I decided not to use it, given now I believe the person who wrote it is African American, but I felt like it kind of, well, here's the thing. Like, I think because we generally deify a lot of our heroes, or a lot of people in political spectrum, that we tend to hype up the good that they do, and especially when they do bad stuff, like that's often also kind of pronounced as well.
Yeah, more so in some respects.
Right. I think more so. And I felt like the way that this the writer of the article that I did read first felt a little leading towards more negative stuff about Garvey. That's not to say that Garvey
is perfect.
Isn't right. Yeah. None of our heroes are. We're all human. We're all nuanced. But I felt in this case, and especially being one, if you study history, we often tend to read of the stories that from the winning side more often than not, or the majority side, and often not the people that it affects personally. So instead of reading that, I decided, well, what are other people from the Caribbean and what are Jamaicans in particular saying about this?
Right.
So I pulled this article instead. So I do want to preface that because I think it's important to kind of understand, any figure in history, has their good and their bad points, and they should be highlighted. But we often hear of, stories where they come from in terms of, like the people in majority, or often like establishment talking points more often than not. So, and we never hear like the voices of who this would affect. So, So that's why I decided to do here. Now, it would have been fair to read both, but I think for time, I wanted to read this. So, so I pulled this from Jamaica Magazine, where I think it was just an editorial write-up, but they write, Marcus Garvey's arrest and pardon, writing a century-old injustice 85 years after his death. So we'll see what Jamaicans have to say regarding this pardon. Marcus Garvey, the pioneering leader of the Pan-African movement and Jamaica's first national hero, received a posthumous pardon from U.S. President Joe Biden on January 19th. The pardon, achieved through decades of advocacy and successful lobbying of the Congressional Black Caucus, that should tell you everything you need to know, is just the start of righting a historical wrong in an effort to restore Mark Garvey's legacy and reaffirm his enduring influence on global Black liberation. To fully appreciate this moment, it is essential to revisit Garvey's movement the turbulent political climate of the 1920s, the challenges Garvey faced from his critics and the U.S. government, and the legacy he left for future generations of Black leaders. So this is the reason why he was pardoned. Essentially, it was more or less a favor to the Black Congressional Caucus, also known as the Congressional Black Crows, who do nothing but symbolism, but never demand any tangibles that actually would affect people tangibly in terms of the needs of what Black people need, like what Black people need.
Tale as old as time.
Yep, I told you were going to go. So yep. But anyway, born in Jamaica in 1887, the Right Excellence Marcus Mosiah Garvey was the first to create a movement dedicated solely to the liberation and empowerment of Black people on a global scale. As the founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, Garvey sought to unite people of African descent worldwide, promoting economic independence, cultural pride, and the vision of a self-sustaining Black nation. His Pan-Africanist ideals resonated deeply, especially among African Americans living under the harsh realities of Jim Crow segregation. The UNIA's ambitious initiatives, including the Black Star Line Shipping Company, symbolized Markey's call for Black economic self-sufficiency and the eventual reparation to Africa. His bold vision inspired millions and later influenced iconic figures like Malcolm X, MLK, and Nelson Mandela. Garvey's movement was the foundation upon which future Black nationalist and civil rights movements would be built. So obviously, we kind of talked about this in a similar way with our patron saint, Kwame Ture, kind of, kind of building upon what Garvey kind of started, especially with the Black Power movement, that he would become, let's say, a red flag within the establishment.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, the United States in the 1920s was rife with racial tension. The Ku Klux Klan experienced a resurgence, and Jim Crow laws perpetuated systemic discrimination against African Americans. In this hostile environment, Marcus Garvey emerged as a powerful advocate for Black pride, economic self-sufficiency, and unity. Garvey's message challenged the entrenched racial order, alarming both white authorities and conservative Black leaders. His call for a return to Africa and the creation of a self-sustaining Black nation offered a radical alternative to the prevailing strategies of assimilation and integration championed by figures like W.E.B. Du Bois, who headed the NAACP, was critical of Garvey's separatist approach, which he deemed impractical. He opposed the Back to Africa movement, viewing it as counterproductive to the progress of African Americans in the United States. Du Bois and labor leader A. Philip Randolph spearheaded the Garvey Must Go campaign, which sought to discredit his leadership and dismantle his movement. They criticized his financial management of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and projects like the Black Star Line, accusing him of exploiting the hopes of African Americans. On January 15, 1923, 8 prominent African Americans set a petition to U.S. Attorney General Harry M. Daugherty, urging the government to continue prosecuting Marcus Garvey for mail fraud. They also requested an investigation into violent instances linked to Garvey followers. This internal opposition aligned with a broader campaign by the U.S. government to silence Harvey. J. Edgar Hoover, then an ambitious agent in the Bureau of Investigation, later the FBI, viewed Garvey as a dangerous radical and made him one of the first Black leaders to be targeted by federal surveillance.
Arguably enough, Du Bois and Philip Randolph also would have been in the same boat. But,
right. So that should tell you something, that if they weren't necessarily caught up in this, then I think you can put 2 and 2 together, I would argue, in some ways. Yeah. Anyway, Hoover's efforts culminated in Garvey's arrest in 1922 on charges of mail fraud related to the Black Star Line. Efforts to clear Garvey's name began almost immediately after his deportation, but gained significant traction in recent decades. Advocates argued that his conviction was less about criminal wrongdoing and more about silencing a leader who dared to challenge the racial and political status quo. In the decades following Garvey's deportation to Jamaica in 1927, petitions for his exoneration gained momentum but repeatedly failed to gain traction. It was the Congressional Black Caucus, however, that finally succeeded in bringing Garvey's case to the forefront. Citing the political motivations behind his conviction, the caucus presented a compelling case to President Biden, emphasizing Garvey's pivotal role in laying the groundwork for the civil rights movement. Garvey's influence has reverberated through generations. Leaders like Malcolm X credited Garvey's teachings as a foundation to their own philosophies. The Black Panther Party, with its emphasis on self-determination and community empowerment, drew heavily from Garvey's ideals. Even Martin Luther King, though an integrationist, acknowledged Garvey's importance. Thank you. Stating he was the first man on a mass scale to give millions of Negroes a sense of dignity and destiny. Garvey's Pan-Africanist vision also inspired movements for decolonization across Africa, influencing leaders like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya. His ideas remain central to discussions on racial equality and economic justice, serving as a beacon for marginalized communities worldwide. Thoughts?
I mean, sounds about right. I mean, I can see why J. Edgar Hoover would have an issue with him, you know? So, I mean, and the fact that the Black Caucus is, I mean, he's such a, like, figurehead now that, like, you know, it's similar to how things like the FBI tweet that, you know, it's Martin Luther King Day or whatever, even though they were directly involved in his assassination. You know, it's like, to me, it's very similar. It's a lot of like, it just feels performative from them. You know, like they could do things in honor of, right? Like not just pardoning him, but like, I don't know, anything actually tangible, you know?
Right. You know, and again, he died in 1940. So sure, it might be nice, but again, it's symbolic in terms of what it meant. And even, you know, again,
which says so much about the Democratic Party, where it's all symbolism and
but
none of it really
DJ
well
Joe
thought
Nice,
out.
But DJ Joe Nice brought up a good point, you know, like, and I wish I saved it, but unfortunately he wrote it as a story, so I wasn't able to get to it before it, after the 24-hour period. But he mentioned, you know, you could do someone like Assange who needs to be pardoned. You can do, you know, take your pick of someone who's actually living
Snowden,
to actually pardon them, you know, for
people.
crimes that, so you could pardon, and this is one thing that within that World Socialist website said, you could pardon dreamers, you know, in terms of what they need, but no, you end up, and I don't want to say obscure, but I would argue African Americans do not know Marcus Garvey like that to make it significant, you know? So, like, if you are of Caribbean descent and living here, that's one thing, but I don't think it wouldn't be like Malcolm X or MLK here. Like, he's not going to gain that kind of traction here. In terms, and like I said, I wouldn't have known about it had it not been shown on social media. I know it did. This kind of got around a little bit on mainstream media, but not that much.
Yeah.
And even then, it probably was on local news sources, like in New York in particular, where obviously that would be.
And it would only be just tongue baths for whoever did it, you know?
Right.
So
I just saw this more as symbolism, but nothing, you know, just it's a nice thing that Biden did, you know.
It reminds me of all them getting out in fucking kente cloth, honestly.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, same energy. So as I said earlier, I wanted to get the viewpoint of, I think it's important to get a viewpoint of people who this affects the most.
Mm-hmm.
So why not hear from a Jamaican to hear what they have to say about this? So this is YouTuber Dion Jackson Miller. Never heard about her prior to when I pulled together the story. I think we'll play the whole thing she talks about for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But I think she brings up some good points regarding, his pardon, from her standpoint as a Jamaican. So be prepared to hear, I mean, you heard it last night, a very thick Jamaican accent.
I'm fine with that.
But we'll discuss after we watch the clip. So you can go ahead when you're ready.
So U.S. President Joe Biden pardoned Jamaica's first national hero, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, on his last full day in office. But I don't think it matters that much. Why do I say that? Stay tuned. I'm Dion Jackson Miller, and I've got the tea.
Better be hibiscus.
Okay, so a statement came from the White House on Sunday, January 19, 2025, saying that U.S. President Joe Biden was issuing a posthumous pardon, meaning after his death, for Jamaica's first national hero, Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Garvey had been convicted of mail fraud in 1922 in the United States. That is, according to the U.S. Postal Service, mail fraud is a scheme to get money or something of value from someone by offering a product, service, or investment opportunity that does not live up to its claims. And that was supposedly in relation to selling stock in the Black Star Line. So yes, this pardon is being hailed as a big deal because Garveyites, advocates, legal scholars for years had been calling for a pardon and or exoneration for Garvey. Now, people had hoped it would have come from U.S. President Barack Obama, saying that he was the U.S.'s first black president, but nope. So Biden did it. And just to make the distinction, what happened here was a pardon, a presidential pardon, which is within the power of the President of the United States. It's not an exoneration. All right. So a pardon means essentially that you're being forgiven for something you did that's wrong. An exoneration done by a court actually clears you of a previous conviction that you had. And seeing that the consensus is that Garvey was arrested on trumped-up charges and that he was convicted by a kangaroo court, he really should be exonerated. I remember, though, hearing a U.S. official say some years ago that given the kind of backlog they have in the courts, it's hard to justify spending the time and the money it would take to go through an exoneration process to clear Garvey, who is dead. And I can't see what they mean. No, I do appreciate and applaud the work of people who have spent years.
So Dion actually brought up a good point. We talked about this with Pelleter last week because I was wondering, why did they settle for
clemency
versus a full pardon? That's probably why, money.
Yes and no. I mean, theoretically, he could have also pardoned Peltier,
right?
Because it's like it's the same. What she's saying is like, they could have gotten through the courts. The only problem is that the courts are so stacked right now. I don't know if that would ever make it through, even if you took the time to,
Right.
So,
but I have to wonder if it's a similar thing though with Peltier though. Like,
I think that's
more
more
time, which meaning more money, and like.
I think there's even with pardoning. Most people think with a pardon that is an exoneration to in the public eye, even though it's not legally. Right? Like, so I don't even think they wanted to give Peltier that because that like encourages more of the behavior,
Right.
Like they still want a head on a spike, even though that head is 80 years old and going to be stuck on a house arrest, So like with this doesn't hurt anybody to go full pardon. This doesn't piss anybody off. So
right.
They're like, fine. But she is right. Legally, exoneration would be better. But, so.
I mean, the man's dead, so who cares?
Who cares? Right. So, I mean, I imagine the estate of whatever estate is left of the Garvey estate, but, otherwise. But let's listen to a little bit more.
working on this, right? Howard University said that for the last 15 years, one of their professors, Justin Hanford, has been working with Garvey's son, Julius Garvey, on this issue of a pardon for Marcus Garvey. And they said that the effort to convince President Biden to pardon Garvey included letters from 21 members of Congress, mostly, as you probably can expect, from the Congressional Black Caucus. And the letter said, exonerating Mr. Garvey would honor his work for the Black community, remove the shadow of an unjust conviction, and further your administration's promise to advance racial justice. So big up to them. But I have to tell you, neither this pardon from the US president or the idea of an exoneration from the US courts really matters that much to me. So it's not that I'm opposed to this, right? I wouldn't be fighting it. I've done a whole heap of interviews over the years on my programs about the campaign for the pardon, the campaign for the exoneration. But the more I've thought about it over the years,
the
I just don't
is
think
great.
it matters that much to me if the US courts, if the US president, if the US government wants to admit that Garvey was wrongly convicted or not. For me at this point, it's just part of his story. It's part of his wonderful history, his wonderful, rich history. The story of how this black man from Jamaica
What happened?
in the 1920s went to the United States and amassed this following of thousands of people. Imagine him in the 1920s leading a crowd of 50,000 in a parade through the streets, right? And how the US authorities were so afraid of him that they just had to get him out of the way. Once we acknowledge him, I don't care if they do. And what is more important to me is the work that we are doing here at home to honor and to acknowledge Garvey. So let me acknowledge, we have named some stuff after him. Recently, the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation named a council room after him because he used to be a councillor in the KCAC. We have Marcus Garvey Drive, we have Marcus Garvey High School. We're very good at naming things and we're very good at issuing statements. Where we fall down is in some of the fundamental actual work. And I'm talking here about the stuff that's right in front of us, the stuff that is 100% within our control. And I'm talking here about teaching Garvey's philosophy in schools. You see, while we're running up and down, lobbying the US government and creating excitement over this part,
which they're not going to do.
No!
Because
no!
God forbid. God
dude.
forbid you teach Black children about unity and the idea of what he was trying to promote in terms of Black power, or at least the beginnings of, and how, God forbid,
Pan-Africanism alone. They'd be like, no. We need those resources. Don't do that.
You know what? This is what kind of pisses me off about some African Americans, because they will call this, we don't need to know about this stuff. We don't need to, but as I read, he's connected to Malcolm X. He's connected to the Black Panther Party. He's connected to Martin Luther King. So they acknowledged him, in terms of how they essentially how they became
I just find it funny
activists that they are in America because of him, and he is Jamaican. So, so all the mushmouth people who are like, we don't need to
there's this thing about American exceptionalism, right? Where it's, we revolted against the British and we got our independence. Yet you had to call fucking Lafayette over, dog. Like, we needed the French Navy. All right. Like, there's reasons why, even then it was an international issue, an international trade problem. Right. And France was about to have its own revolution, which we helped them. So, and what did they break out for that crap? Huh? Y'all remember? Y'all remember that good French word? That's what I'm saying. People you got to look things at a little broader than just your local area sometimes.
So this is why I don't get the beef online towards Black immigrants and African Americans who feel like we have to work separately.
It's purpose division.
It's division on purpose. And then, as I said, the idea that many of the people in America that we respect got their ideas from other people, Black people from other nations. Marcus Garvey in particular, as we said, had an influence of both Malcolm X and MLK. And the Black Panther Party, who, even in our space, a lot of people kind of talk in a highlight, yes, but they a lot of their basis of Garvey.
Mm-hmm.
So it's imperative that we understand, even with the fathers of the movement, so to speak,
well,
were
especially
inspired
when
by other.
the Caribbean is so important to this aspect
Right.
of like, I don't know, there's a few islands that y'all got control of. Like maybe you
Right.
should go look at them and see what they did. You know?
Right.
Like any of those things. I think that's the thing of like, now look, there's definitely parts of this discussion where like, yeah, we probably shouldn't be sending tons of like money and military aid to places around the world. Yeah, sure, definitely keep those resources here on that. We could definitely use some healthcare and infrastructure, but having said that, it doesn't mean you just completely ignore the international issues.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, but anyway,
Keep going.
Yep.
Harden and continuing to call for an exoneration. All of that is all very well and good, but we're not handling our business here at home. Like everything else, what we've done here is, it's like peanuts. It's performative. It's not substantial. I cannot tell you how many years we've been talking about teaching Garvey in schools. So in 2012, big announcement, right? This was 13 years ago, half a generation. The proud announcement that the teaching of Garvey finally was being officially launched in schools. Then Education Minister Ronald Thwaites said this. He said, today, resolutely and over all the grades of schools from pre-primary up to grade 11. You hear what I say? Pre-primary up to grade 11. We say as a people that we honor our own and that we will uplift the values and attitudes of our people. We will remember one amongst us who struggled so that we could have that second emancipation, which is our right and our heritage. Sound good, not true? So what is Dion complaining about? Well, tell me then why. 8 years after that launch, 8 years, meaning a child would have finished high school, start high school and finish high school. 8 years after that launch in 2020, historian Professor Rupert Lewis was calling for Garvey to be taught in schools. Tell me, how? Tell me why in 2023 we now have another proud announcement by another education minister saying we will be teaching Garvey to almost 2,000 children. All right. Now, this wasn't even a national program, and even worse than that, it wasn't even a Ministry of Education program. Education Minister Favour Williams says the initiative was first introduced to the curriculum unit of the ministry in July 2022 by a private entity. I mean, understand. What you mean first introduced? So, warm to 2012.
Yes.
In other words, the establishment.
By a private entity. Yeah.
So the establishment. So in other words, I want to bet they don't want Harvey to be taught in schools. Because God forbid that you actually rise up at, like woke Caribbean, Jamaican kids, So, yeah. So I think and they do the same thing here. So don't get it twisted. Like, I think they use it as a great talking point, obviously, given the significance of Garvey in Jamaica especially. But they don't want the effect of it.
Yeah.
They don't want the uprising from it. So
no.
But yeah,
clearly
it's
there's
just
fuckery afoot, as it would be put. Like I keep waiting for the bumba clots to get thrown in. You know what I mean? Like I'm down.
Launch. Warm to that. Warm to the work that was done for the 2012 launch. In 2024, we were told that the program was now in 23 primary schools. Look, I'm not trying to discredit the work that these people are doing, right? A little work certainly is better than no work. 23 schools certainly is better than 0 schools. I am saying, though, that we're a pack of jokers in this country. We're teaching Garvey in 23 primary schools, and we have 1,010 primary and secondary schools in Jamaica. So we're not serious. We can't move forward on anything because we take this project approach to everything, all right? We make a big announcement. We have something going for 2 years in a limited area, in a limited way, and then the money run out, everybody go home. And then in another 2 or 3 or 5 years, we get some more money, and we start the whole thing all over again. It's just a cycle, and we keep repeating it over and over, and that's why we can't reach nowhere. Look,
Preach.
there is no fundamental belief by the authorities over the years in this country that Marcus Garvey's beliefs are worth permanent incorporation into the curriculum of our schools at all levels. You know how I can say this? Because we're not doing it. It's all about announcements being made for the media, some work that's done, and then everything falls apart until another set come in another 5 years and start the whole thing all over again. Time with it, they run up and down to the US about pardon and exoneration and happy now with this pardon and creating excitement over whatever foreign government wants to do or not do. We would be sorting out our own business. It's just part of this phenomenon in Jamaica where we are so much more concerned about external validation than internal validation. Once somebody of foreign says something about one away, it's a big thing, right? But you say something here at home, nobody pay any mind. We're just we're still foreign minded. We're still outward looking. We're not inward looking. And the issue of Garvey is just one more example of this, along with the Jamaican language. But another video for that another day. There are just so many wonderful ideas that Garvey had that would be of so much benefit to our young people nowadays, many of whom are just struggling with identity and with self-worth and with self-esteem. There is a lot to be learned from Garvey in that regard. We need to get serious about the things that are within our control. Teach Garvey in school at all levels in a fun, learner-centric, activity-based, practical way that will really mean something to children. Then you can come to me and create excitement about what some other government do in some other country. So Garvey said, up ye mighty race, accomplish what ye will. There you have the magic word right there. Will. Where's the will? Thank you so much for watching. I'm Dion, and that's the tea.
Nope.
I mean, you know, she said that Jamaica are far.
I'm betting that's hibiscus tea. I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I think we here are too closed-minded or too isolationist-minded that we always have to think about ourselves, and not necessarily there's anything wrong with that, but needing to be open. But I think the idea of being open to other ways of thinking, of other ways that can be done outside of our American bubble, I think also need to be brought into. Also need to be brought into the chat, and we often cast that aside. And I think, and I kind of feel that way too, in a way, you know, personally, just me being international, that often that when I share my views, it's often kind of looked at, who the hell are you to kind of talk to me, you know, but you
I'm
know,
your
but as I
daddy.
said,
Get used to it. Sorry. No, shouldn't be like that.
But all that to say, again, and Dion said it, thank you, that this is nothing more than a symbolic gesture that Biden did. Just, yeah. You gave Jamaica, you gave Jamaica some praise for a couple of seconds, but what is and I would make that argument here. What would be the significance of Garvey here? Like, no one's going to care that much. So really, it'd be just something that you can kind of say that Biden did for a few seconds, and then you can just brush it aside and move on. But not talking about the significance of what he was trying to implement, and how, again, if people were taught, oh no, he actually, if it wasn't for Marcus Garvey, we may not have a Malcolm X. We may not have these figures are more prevalent in our community, that it might start having people question, oh, so what did Harvey teach about? What was it that kind of inspired these other leaders to want to kind of continue in his steed?
Part of that goes with like anti-intellectualism in general, you know? Like, and there's plenty of reasons for that. The college system is not great when it's for profit. You know, and it's definitely exploitative and classist and lots of things, but education isn't and shouldn't be, you know. It should be what you strive for, to be well educated, you know.
Well-educated.
You know.
Well, I would also say this, because Leon said it too, you need to have the will to do it. So if it were me as a teacher, I wouldn't wait. Like, I wouldn't wait for any like curriculum developer to develop a curriculum.
Do it anyway,
you know?
If you can.
I'll do it anyway, you know. And if you're that skilled as a teacher, you should be able to do it. So there's really no reason why teachers can't take it upon themselves to do it.
Well, and not just teachers. I mean, if you have any of those skills, animation, video production, any of those things, being that, you know, educating your people in that way is, I think, useful. You know, and not enough of it is happening.
Dad, he'd be more than willing to come to Jamaica and teach the kids.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm dead serious. He would like give him that opportunity and he will fly on the next plane out and do it. But like, and I'm saying that because like the history is there. The people are there already. Like, you don't need to wait, but it's just the idea of mobilizing people in order to get it done. So
especially from the people from the global south there, you know, the Caribbean, South America have probably been the most recent exploited, you know, countries. Not that Africa also isn't still, but, you know, like, I mean, we just banana republics and all that stuff, all part of that, you know. So, and right in that era from the 20s to the 40s to pre-World War II to after World War II, it's all right there, pretty accessible to people to go read and learn about. So get to learning, folks. You know, you might find some solutions in there. So
yeah, I thought it was interesting. I wanted to, as I said, I wanted to report on the story since last week, but
yes, sir.
You know, but I think this is just kind of another example of the symbolism that the Democratic Party gives to Black people and how they're not really serious in actually giving justice to Black people in terms of giving them tangible things that would affect their lives. It's just the idea of a name or the idea of the look or the words, but not the actions and not the policy, more importantly, that will actually uplift Black people in terms of the liberation that the Black people have been wanting.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is why such stories like these we're as a channel demonetized. So if you want us to talk about other stories such as these, and if you have your smartphone, please scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can type in the link that you see on your screen, the Ko-fi link. If you're in the chat, you can type in !donate, all one word, and the link will pop up for you, and you're able to donate. And again, as little as a dollar helps us towards the channel. Obviously, we know right now that people are kind of down and out and not making the money that they need in order to survive. So the free version, if you want to support us, is don't forget to like and subscribe, and please make sure to share our content to help us fight the suppression, and make sure to leave a comment. Did you know about Marcus Garvey being pardoned? How do you feel about this symbolic gesture that Biden gave, you know, to the Black community? And do you agree what Dion said in terms of the agency that people need in order to make things happen, not just in Jamaica, but in the world at large, and in your communities at large? And help us get to free K. We are getting there slowly, but we appreciate you all liking and subscribing to us in order to get our numbers up and more people are able to see our work. And thank you for watching. We love you.
We love yous. All right. To the chat. Hopefully the class is ready for their pop quiz. So
Nally said, "Happy Chinese New Year." Yep, it's a Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year today.
What are we? Year of the Rat?
Snake.
That's it. I knew that. That. People talking about lamb when we should be talking about goat. But what the lady with the last accent, it should be goat. You know, I'm just saying. So, but. Yeah, Jamaican accent. People are noticing, like, I love the Jamaican accent. Sean Accord, Lord. Yeah, me too. Not enough blood clots in there for me, though, you know? You need to toss one or two of those in. Blood clot.
Bad cookies. Said exoneration is second best to vindication, but both are so sweet.
Yep. Bad Cookies also says year of the Elizabeth Warren. Pretty funny joke. Yeah, dude, fire goats, dude. I always love when Collin complains about the price of oxtail. Such a Caribbean complaint. I'm here for it. Like, it's fucking supposed to be the cheap shit. It's what, like, I already know.
It is the cheap shit.
It's supposed to be.
It is the cheap. It's supposed to be the cheap shit.
Until someone named it Asabuco, and then it became a problem.
It's what the slave owners gave to black people, to black slaves, you know, because they got the best cuts of meat and everything else, and we got the scraps, and we had to try and figure out how to make this actually delicious. Like,
don't be telling people about no lingua either.
That back in the day would have been worth like 2 cents.
If y'all teach the white people about lingua, there's going to be a problem. All right?
Right.
You know?
So something that is worth like 2 cents back in the day is now like upwards of $10 a pound or more.
I'm telling you, someone called it Asabuco and you had a problem, bro. You know? So Natalie Williams bacon used to be the cheap shit too. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
until
that's
Epic Mealtime
that's the
put it on everything.
Soul food, right?
Cheap
shit.
Ham hock, pig's ears, pig trotters. Welcome to the South.
Right.
We still got that shit. I can go get you pickled chicken feet right now. Go ahead on down to the Dollar General. You know,
I'll complain about oxtail being expensive all day long. Funny enough, like, just as an aside, you know, my mom, when I visited over Christmas, she was like, "Oh, I eat oxtail all the time." I'm like, with what money?
With what money? I know, dude. Funny.
Look, for me, oxtail is like something special that if they have it on a menu at a restaurant, I might consider to get it. Or that's like a once a year type thing for me. Like normally for me around Christmas. Like my mom actually did make oxtail when I was home. And like last year I made oxtail for myself here over Christmas. But yeah, that's like that's not only that, but just on a basic level, that's a project. Like you gotta season that shit, and you have to slow cook that mess all day. And then I turned that mess into lasagna, so that was another day. So
oxtail lasagna seems like, to me, that's like Wagyu hamburger, which is just like, why would you do that? Like, first of all, I can take regular hamburger meat and add a ton of fat into it, and it's the same thing. Like, I could just go get beef tallow and like throw it through and get the same ratio. Why are we taking beautiful intramuscular Wagyu, right? Like all that lovely fat that's in the muscle and then grind it all up? That's stupid. Now, granted, if you had a big Wagyu cow and all the offcuts you're making hamburger, that's one thing. But that's not what y'all are doing. Y'all are taking like ribeye and blending it up. Like, no.
Well, again, oxtail traditionally is the cheap meat.
Cheap shit. I know. Dude, it's the same thing. It's like ribs used to be the cheap part. Now it's like you can't do that. Like a rack of ribs is like what, $30 now? It like ridiculous. It's craziness. You find if I'm dude, the probably ham hock are gonna be $40 coming up. You know, which is like what? The craziest one, and I thought for a second that like white people might start doing it, but I realized it was way too much work. Marco Pierre White, who taught Ramsay, right? Gordon Ramsay's big French frou-frou Michelin dude, used to do a pig trotter, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was deboned pig trotter, which in and of itself, like, Collin, go take all the bones out of your foot. You know, like that's a lot of fucking work. It's a lot of bones in there. You know, undo all those and then like roll it like duxelle and all that French nonsense. And then like roll it back up, sew it back up so it still looks like a pig trotter. Just ridiculous stuff. But yeah, it's just
But speaking of food,
yes, which is an important aspect, I think, to culture. It's the one thing that, like, I think it brings people together in a way that nothing really else can. you know? So I brought
very
this.
quick.
Go
Hold
ahead.
on, very quick. I got a chat from Kate.
Yeah.
She was like, I'm so old that I remember when oxtails were, Jesus Christ, 29 cents per pound.
29 cents a pound. Oh my God. Get the time machine. We're going back.
And that's when I was an adult and living in my own house.
Oh.
What year was this?
Yeah, tell me.
What
Bring
year
us
was
back.
this?
Get the hot tub
Tell
time
me to
machine
the
now.
time when oxtail was that cheap.
Oh my God, we'd make a killing. Me and you would set up a restaurant right now. You know, just rice and oxtail, dude. I'm down. But anyway, so I brought this. This is from the Institute for Palestinian Studies. I found it important to kind of bring the voice of the people that is actually living in Gaza, right? And what they find important, and little slice of life stuff. Plus, food is the ultimate equalizer. I think everyone can kind of get down with that, you know? So, but this article titled 3 onions, 2 tomatoes, and 1 eggplant. Okay? Now, this is actually like them getting tomatoes off the ground from one of the food trucks, right? So, and we've seen other stuff from them about food trucks, but January 17th is when the article was published, but I think this is actually from even earlier than that, just to give time frame for people. So this was like before the ceasefire for sure. But and I don't know, I think this must be West Bank, I would imagine, right?
Could be.
So I don't know specifically. I'd love to know. If the author wants to reach out to me, they're welcome to. But they write, and the author is Dima Dalul. I hope I got that right. I apologize if it's not. So they write, my father and brother could obtain 3 onions, 2 tomatoes, and 1 eggplant when a food truck filled with fruits and vegetables passed our house. Minutes before the truck arrived, my father was resting after spending the day chopping wood while my brother was experimenting with new methods and ways to lift barrels of water. We heard the sound of people running in the street, mimicking a hysterical alarm clock, forcing us up. Around the world, there is a rush hour in the early morning or late afternoon, people rushing home to work to do holiday shopping. In Gaza, we have an equivalent, except I call it rush minutes, or people snatching real food before being carried on aid trucks before it vanishes into the city of rubble that has consumed our world and spat our people out, leaving them famished for not only food, but also life. The truck had large wheels, sealed windows, and cracked side mirrors. It seemed like a living being running for its life. People raced to jump on its flatbed. One had to be light-footed to climb it quickly and safely, avoiding being crushed below. The real battle began once you were up, with mere seconds to pick something up and hop off, but no one taught us how to quickly open boxes on the back of a moving truck as hundreds of starving people clung on. It's a good story to tell your kids if you succeed. My brother refused to chase a food truck in a forest of hungry mouths, but when my mother announced that we didn't have flour, he decided to risk his life rather than watch us starve. I looked at the crowd that appeared from thin air, all of them trying to take whatever their hands could reach. I saw some young men strip their shirts and use them as bags. My father scurried behind me, late and lost in the crowd. There wasn't much to gather. If the truck had stopped in the street, we could have taken an entire bag of veggies. But unfortunately, it had only passed by the house, and luckily, we were not ready. We were not ready. My brother wasn't empty-handed when he returned. He brought 3 onions, 2 tomatoes, and 1 eggplant. Again, for a family of what, Care Bear? What do we got already? Brother, father, mother, sister. Already 4 people.
Right.
You know, so we were mesmerized by their vivid colors, the smell of the tomatoes, and their soft texture. My father was able to also gather some smashed tomatoes from the ground, better than to be wasteful. Before the war, I used to role play as a chef. though the only thing I could make was cake in all its flavors. Date cake and apple cake were my favorites. I loved using healthy ingredients in my recipes. In the kitchen, when my family would prepare dinner, I was in charge of cutting and slicing the vegetables. I don't know where is our cutting board these days. We no longer need to use it. Most of my sisters now theoretically know how to cook. It is a progress to celebrate because we all know what every meal requires. When we ask for a certain meal to prepare, we immediately group the unobtainable components, which leads us to cancel the entire idea, as they are what makes the dish the way it is. A family meeting was conducted to decide the meals to be prepared using the treasure my brother found. My younger brother wanted a salad, but 2 tomatoes can't satisfy a family of 9. So we rejected his suggestion. My sister suggested making stuffed eggplant, but our eggplant wasn't large enough and could barely feed 1 person. We were running out of suggestions, but thankfully, my mother spoke. We will use 1 tomato, 1 onion, and the eggplant to make makloba, and the other tomato and 1 onion to make maftool. The last online we will keep for other dishes. We all wanted to bite into the raw, fresh vegetables, but alas, we strive to include fresh organic ingredients in at least 1 meal every 3 days during the genocide, so we could attempt to change our palate from canned foods. So, this is makluba, if you're not aware. It's this lovely little upside-down rice dish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Literally like the national dish of Palestine, and I do believe it's DJ Khaled's favorite food. The traitorous asshole that he is. But makluba is a Middle Eastern upside-down chicken and rice dish that's served in various permutations across the Levant. It's often referred to as the national dish of Palestine, and it's something I grew up eating mostly on special occasions. This is from Louis Gaffari at Urban Farm and Kitchen. I put recipe links in the description below if people want to actually try these out. I think it's important to keep these recipes alive because I don't want a particular country to steal the heritage again. So, best know where these recipes come from and keep them going. So, but the other one is maftool, right? Gorgeous caviar-sized pearls made of whole wheat, right? Similar to, it's like couscous wrapped in more wheat flour, right? So simply means rolled in Arabic. In northern Palestine, where my father is from, people tend to make the balls slightly larger and call them mokrabia, literally of the Maghreb. Probably a reference to North African couscous, which is similarly prepared, right? So, I mean, this is pretty much stewed vegetables on top of grain.
Right? And chickpea. Yeah.
And I didn't hear them talk about protein sources in there. So,
well, looking at the pictures, chickpeas
would be,
and then
rice.
Rice. I would imagine it would be like a high carb diet.
Generally, just because that's what's available.
That's available. Yeah.
Probably beans if you can get them.
Right.
Of some kind. Right. Rice and bean would make a complete protein.
Right.
But yeah, recipes for both of those down in the description. You're welcome. Go tell me how those work out in the comments. I bet you they're probably far more lavish than what people are actually eating now. On those days, we'd set up 9 mismatched plates as we each had a perfect shape and depth and sit anticipating to eat an old taste of a dish we'd recognized before the war. Excited, we'd greet the food, long time no see. Those meals, made with fleeting ingredients from passing trucks, were more delicious than the meals we'd make with complete sets of ingredients and seasonings, or perhaps we'd forgotten what they tasted like. I stayed by the window most days, waiting for a truck to drive by. August 4th, 2024. Okay. Right? So, bit about the author. Dima Dalula is a 20-year-old writer from Gaza. She's a middle child and an avid reader trying to find her place in the world. She used to study business and worked as a digital marketer, but not anymore. Currently, she's trying again to survive starvation and war being waged on Gaza. And while the genocide has not stopped, she's also been trying to be thankful for living. Good for her. But yeah, thoughts?
I mean, it sucks that your life would succumb to the idea of like, well, on one hand, it's a way of being thankful for food. But on the other hand, it's in the way of having to wait and then getting it off a truck and then may not necessarily having enough. It's kind of like what we just talked about before in terms of having to make, a meal out of, squeeze what you can get out of like the scraps.
Yeah.
Which it sounds like exactly what they had to do here.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like the state of affairs in Gaza in terms of, and I think in a way it sounds like they're probably more along the luckier ones in terms of
for sure
having a food truck at all come through.
Yeah.
So, because we know that Israel has a food
especially
now,
August 4th.
Aid.
You
Right.
know.
We know that Israel has withheld aid. So like, there's no telling like how many food trucks actually go by, and if they're able to purchase any food or whatever is remaining, and how much more expensive I'm sure food is now given the lack of it there. So yeah, I think it just humanizes the human condition in Gaza a little bit more in terms of the reality of what they face in order to live. Not even just so much feed themselves, but live.
Yeah. I did find it interesting that she was like, it tastes better than the food that we had before, which I think
it's not a guarantee.
Yeah. On top of that, I personally feel like putting limitations on any art in and of itself ends up making it like you're more creative in some respects with those restrictions, but it is kind of like for a family of 9 to be that excited about, what, a couple of onions and an eggplant, like, is just kind of, I think for a lot of Westerners, that doesn't make a lot of sense to them.
But I think I said this before, like in terms of when I was in Africa, like you kind of realize in a lot of ways how really the way that we live now, again, is relative, but the way that we live, generally speaking, is a luxury. Like generally speaking, you can afford to buy food.
You have
even
a stove. You have a stove to cook on.
Right.
Like
you are guaranteed. You can turn on the light in your house, and unless you pay your stuff, like you can more or less guarantee that you'll have power, you have electricity, you have the things being able to function in your house. Like in Africa, that's not a guarantee. Like you can have the power go out at any time.
Yeah.
And I know here, like if power goes out, people complain. Like, oh, I can't do this. Oh, I can't do that. When I lived in Africa, that was like, okay.
Right. Yeah.
Moving on.
Like, well, that's in the places with power.
Like,
let alone the places out in the bush that don't have it, where women are constantly chopping wood to feed their family, like going up the street to get water. And I think that this shows, like, especially here too, they're I remember watching them cook bread in a hospital because that's all, like they needed to do it. There was no other place to do that. So, I think people take a lot of that for granted here, so like
it is truly a luxury being able to live more or less war-free.
Yeah.
In this side of the world and not having to worry about where a next meal is coming from, not much less so being able to cook it.
Yeah.
But that's the reality of people in Gaza and probably the West Bank right now, where this is something that they have to contend with every single day. So it's really humbling too. And also just
The fact that they find it still so important to connect with their family like that is also a big deal to me. You know? Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's still a process for them and still massively important part of their culture. And, you know, they're trying to keep that as best they can together. You know, it's not the first time I've seen them all gather around some meal that they pulled together for people. You know, I saw people giving food to children there that, you know, Israel felt like those people couldn't exist anymore. So, you know, it's frustrating to me, while also like a bit of hope in there that people are still trying, you know? So, but that's why I wanted to bring it was that, and also to give the people the opportunity to like celebrate this food while the people themselves can't, you know? Right. So I left those recipes in the description. Please tell me how they come out if they try them, you know? I should give one or two of them a shot myself. And, you know, but I mean, it's one of the things you said that's their biggest hospitality trait, you know, over there was around that. So, yeah. And very simple, like ingredient focused stuff, you know, with like just technique and time. Pretty good stuff. But yep, let me know what you think. You know, talking about this kind of stuff is why we're demonetized. So you can go to ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork, scan that QR code on your screen, or it's always in the description below. You know, but if you can't do that, we get it. Times are tough. Just like and subscribe, share the stream, share the clip. Let us know what you think, you know. But otherwise, thanks for watching. Cool. Well, yeah, I'm interested to try both those. So I don't know about you, you know. You might give one a shot yourself. I mean, they didn't seem too difficult. So no. You know, but so a lot of times it's finding the exact spices and stuff. I need to pick up like some za'atar. I've not done that, and I don't have that on hand, you know. Mm-hmm. Sumac also would be a good thing to throw in there, right? I'm trying to think of all those Middle Eastern like spice zones. But you know, Greek yogurt, saffron, all the classics. But anyway, what you got? Anything?
Actually, I think there is. I just find it. I think there's kind of a breaking story that I saw. Something about a crash for Black Hawk and a drone in my neck of the woods. Let me see if I can find it. I had it. Yeah. So this is from Kate. My husband is watching MSNBC and hearing breaking news of a helicopter crash on the Potomac. It was a U.S. Black Hawk, according to my husband.
Yeah, they like to fall out of the sky occasionally. Helicopters can kind of do that. I don't know specifically what the issue was, but the way helicopters work is we're pushing a lot of air. Like, you know, it's essentially a wing that spins, right? So wings need air to work, right? And you can push the air away from the wing, right? This happens with drones too. It's literally called like the death spiral, right? Essentially, you have to like counter rotate your helicopter to like, essentially you just suddenly become a brick, you know, you're just a falling rock. So like, not to say you can't, this is why we have a tail rotor, you know, but, and there's very specific, but it's essentially, you can just not have atmosphere, and that's tough. So, but, you know, there's ways around it, but, you know, U.S. military infrastructure is not the best. So I'm sure there's some fun stuff, hit a duck or something like that. But, you know, I mean, it could just be the apocalypse for all we know, which will bring us to our next segment, right? Yeah. But anyway, you ready for that one?
Yes. So this story is kind of a continuation of a story that we reported on last year around this time. So this judge, this is Ugandan judge Julia Sepentinde. She was known in the wrong possible way of rejecting South Africa's genocide case against Israel. Like she was the one that was like, nah, they're good. So, you know, I figured that we were going to talk about her at some point again, and sure enough, we are.
Well,
like,
she's
almost a
now
year later.
gotten
She's now the ICJ president.
Right, they upgraded her.
Right.
So,
and we probably have an answer as to why. Now, as I said, she's from Uganda. Again, as I said, I lived in Uganda and I visited the country many times. The last time I was there was in 2019. I should have made this connection a lot sooner, given my experience there, and especially within, you know, the Christian missionary,
which is all over Uganda,
industry there,
and Nigeria, and you know,
and yeah. But shout out to Max Blumenthal from the Gray Zone, who made this connection for me. And this story actually, not in a lot of ways, is personal to me because, and we'll get into it, but I have a lot of familiarity with one organization in particular that he is going to mention. So he reports new ICJ president, a Christian Zionist influenced by end times theology. So, Reef, for those at home that may not know, because I know you've said it before, can you define what the end times in terms of the Bible is?
Well, there's a couple of things about angels holding 12 candles and coming down, and, you know, rapture and lots of fun stuff that, you know, like essentially war between heaven and earth, and I don't know what. We're all in Revelations, right? This is all.
Yes.
So, but one of it includes that the Jews need to own Israel. That's in the book, yes? Like, I don't know if it's specifically in the book, but I think that's part of it. And there's like, you know, the devil on earth is like making sure that war and pestilence is a big problem. We've got what? The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse comes in.
Yeah.
Right? I forget the 4. War. Plague.
Well, basically it's the apocalypse, just the apocalypse in preparation for Jesus's return.
Which would then rapture starts, all the good Christians go up to the good place. All the bad ones go to the bad place. Lots of clothes on the ground, sort of thing.
Right.
You know? So.
Right. So that's.
But it's definitely influenced a ton of like the super fundamentalists, like evangelicals, you know?
Yes. So how does this connect to this judge who is now the ICJ president? Max will report. So Julia Sepentinde stood alone in rejecting South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Now the court's president, the Ugandan judge, suggests her motives for protecting Israel can be found in the Old Testament. With new countries joining South Africa's case accusing Israel of committing genocide in the Gaza Strip and a ceasefire potentially enabling... And a ceasefire potentially enabling war crime investigators to gather fresh evidence of Israeli atrocities. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just go to Twitter, folks. There's plenty there.
Right.
Anyway, a leadership shakeup at the ICJ threatens to undermine the campaign for legal accountability. The ICJ's president, Nawaf Salam, resigned on January 14th to become prime minister of Lebanon, and was succeeded by Justice Julia Sepentinde of Uganda. Many observers were stunned when Sepentinde voted no on all resolutions introduced by South Africa in January 2024, placing herself in opposition to all ICJ judges, including her Israeli colleague, Aaron Barak. The Ugandan judge rejected the court's call for the Israeli military to halt deliberate assaults on civilians and its policies on forced displacement, and cancel its planned invasion of Rafah. In a previous advisory case on the illegal consequences of Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories, Seputinde insisted that Palestinians had not been subjected to any military occupation whatsoever. In fact, she concluded that Israel may have the right to maintain a permanent presence in the West Bank and the whole of Jerusalem on the basis of purely biblical claims.
Mm-hmm.
Sebutinde's opinion opened with a lengthy history of the Israel-Palestine conflict that blended well-worn Zionist propaganda with the Old Testament. In rejecting her colleague's ruling declaring Israel's military occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem illegal, she resorted on accounts of the Jewish presence in the biblical land of Israel, omitting any mention of UN resolutions or international law. There is substantial evidence that Jewish people lived in the region of ancient Israel between 1000 and 586 BCE. This period corresponds to the era of the United Monarchy under King Saul, David, and Solomon, and the subsequent divided kingdoms of Israel and Judah. The evidence includes archaeological findings in the city of David, Seputinde insisted. The Hebrew Bible, or Old Testament, offers detailed accounts of the history, culture, and governance of the Israelites during this period. While these texts are religious in nature, many scholars consider them valuable historical documents. Any thoughts before I continue on with this bullshit?
Plenty of fucking thoughts. Fucking, first of all, I love when Christians have no idea what their fucking fairy tale book even says, right? Because in each of these evidences, they say in the text that people were already fucking there. They say it in the texts. And then on top of that, can we please stop using the Bible as historical fact? Can we please stop using that shit? Because I hate to tell you, I'm sorry if it, hurt some fifis for people. We don't even know if Jesus was real. Only 2 Jewish historians ever mention him after the fucking fact, and it was way after his death. Meanwhile, the Romans took loads of documentation on almost everyone they crucified, especially political prisoners, and especially the King of the Jews. They would have had some, a documentation on. And if he was real, he definitely didn't look like no BG Jesus. All right? He would have been Palestinian. Right. That's what he would have looked like. So I just find it ridiculous that this is what they base it on. Right. Another lady got called out for thinking that, they have a biblical right to the land. No, you don't. And I'm not going to let you use Harry Potter to take an entire people's country and perform a genocide. I'm sorry. I wish we could do without the religions entirely and we'd be much better off. But that's just me. I don't even like diet religion.
I'll just say it kind of simply to what you said. Religion is about people in terms of how you connect with others. It's not about land. It's never been about a land grab.
I'm not saying that there's not plenty of good morals you can get from that, but there's also some better reference material for all those morals.
Right.
It's that morals do not come from the religion. So, that's just me. I have a problem with all the new age spiritual shit that gets pushed too, but I'm highly skeptical of any of that shit. Please don't come at me. I've already made my decisions on the matter and I will not budge from them, but, meanwhile, all the prominent atheists that you used to be able to look up to are silent when an entire religion is being used to fucking excuse a genocide. They're real quiet right now. Funny how that fucking works. I'm looking at you, Stephen Fry, Hitchens. Plenty of you need to be taken to the woodshed too. I hate to tell you. Y'all should fucking know better. But, they're more than willing to call out Islam, so
Right.
Even though same God, by the way, like technically, you know, they have their own names for Peter and David and Solomon and, you know, but what do I know? They even read the Old Testament. That's still part of their teaching too. So, which is the worst part of the Bible, the Old Testament, but that's just me. You know, dude, I could go off. You don't want me to like, I'll be here all day yelling about it, but you know.
But anyway, so anyway, her opinion was so extreme and so shot through with theological commentary, it prompted Uganda's ambassador to the United Nations, Ndonda Ajibare, to declare her ruling at the International Court of Justice does not represent the government of Uganda's position on the situation in Palestine. So he actually said, Justice Seputende ruling at the International Court of Justice does not represent the government of Uganda's position on the situation in Palestine. She has previously voted against Uganda's case on Congo. Uganda's support for the plight of Palestinian people has been expressed through Uganda's voting pattern at the United Nations. So he essentially called her out for her vote. Although I feel like this is kind of saving face a little bit, and I'll say why in a few minutes. So what accounted for Seputende's defiance in the face of the entire ICJ panel and her own country's diplomatic corps? Again, I don't believe in that entirely. Has she been handed by maligned external forces, or was she driven by deeply held personal passions? Israel's history of bribing, threatening, and blackmailing officials around the world and destroying those who forcefully oppose it is well documented. Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, fell under heavy Mossad surveillance after he introduced warrants for the arrest of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his then Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. In October 2024, when an anonymous accuser brought forward allegations of SH against Khan, there could be little doubt an Israeli hand had finessed the scandal. Seputende's fanatical adherence to Israel's agenda does not appear to be the product of manipulation or enticement, however. The views expressed in her dissent on the South African case were much more likely a reflection of the Christian Zionist belief system she developed as a member of Watoto, a Pentecostal megachurch in the Ugandan capital of Kampala. It was there that Seputende said she developed her worldview under the tutelage of a Canadian pastor and end times aficionado named Gary Skinner. The godly values of integrity, honesty, justice, mercy, empathy, and hard work that the Skinners and Watoto Church instilled and nurtured in me over the years account for who I am today and have immensely contributed to my incredible career as a judge in Uganda and a judge at the International Court of Justice, Seputende proclaimed during a June 2024 ceremony for the launch of a new branch of the church in downtown Kampala. So you could scroll out a little bit because I want to say something about this.
Yes.
I visited Watoto when I lived there. So to give you guys some context, as I said, I volunteered at an orphanage, essentially. And one of the things that we did as part, I wouldn't say training, as part of the class that I was taking, was we went to Kampala in the capital and visited different orphanages just to kind of compare and contrast what we experienced at ours and what other orphanages did. And one of them was Watoto. I was only there for maybe like a couple of hours at most, but I also am familiar with them because they do tours in the US. So essentially they'll bring kids from their ministry to perform like songs and dance or whatever to different churches and organizations, you know, in the country, and in an effort to raise money, you know, for the church / the ministry.
Right.
And back then, you know, yes. So back then, you know, while I thought it was, I don't know, I thought it was a kind of I didn't say it was a good thing. I thought it was okay. I will admit, even then, I had mixed thoughts because a lot of these kids were going to Walt Disney World. They took helicopter flights, to various places. So to me, it just felt like they were taking these kids from Uganda who were orphaned and giving them a perspective of America that isn't true for most of us. So I felt like in a lot of ways they were kind of being not raised, but kind of being immersed in a classist environment here, which is not typical of most of us here. But more importantly, because they're young and kids, and especially given usually these are white missionaries who are taking them this, they will kind of have not brainwash, but they'll have a very skewed view of what America is like. And I experienced that at the ministry that I worked at, volunteered for, because a lot of the kids there, when they found out that I lived here, they assumed I was rich. They assumed, actually, it was kind of funny, the assumptions that they had, about me. They assumed that I was working at my computer all day and I was essentially lazy because, they weren't working in the fields like they did. They had to in order to grow their food, but also make money off of it for their families or whatever, to sell their food, So they had an image of affluence, which I would argue was partially influenced by the missionaries that would come over there. And I'll give you a good example. Like, one of them I still talk to. He's living in the UK now. But at the time, one of my last visits there, when I visited him, I think it was important, given that I was Black and I had a relationship with him, that he felt very comfortable to tell me this, because I don't think, and he even said to me, and I had other Ugandans say to me when I was over there, they felt very comfortable to speak more freely to me. And I asked one of them why. And one of them said, because at the time I didn't want them to share so much, given that I was only visiting. I was only going to be there for a short amount of time. But one of the people that I spoke to kind of mentioned Ugandan. Actually, she was from Sudan, but she was living in Uganda. But she was like, you know what? Like, I see you as a brother because you're of me, essentially, being of the continent, so to speak. And I feel that you're in a better position to understand our experience versus them. In other words, the white missionaries that were essentially, I don't want to say in this way, but essentially over them. So, but this guy that I talked to mentioned, because at the ministry that I was at, the white missionaries generally, they built houses on the land where the ministry was, and they would look a lot better than the Ugandan staff that were living there. The Ugandan houses were basically like, they were fine, but they were definitely more run down, especially over the years as I visited. They weren't really upkept very much, But I remember in this one place I actually visited, like in one of the missionaries' houses. Keep in mind, this is Uganda's on the equator, so like it's warm pretty much all year round.
Yeah.
Like, they had installed like a screen that you can take a remote and it just kind of comes down. They installed a fireplace in their house, which I'm kind of like,
you don't need that.
You don't need that. Number two, you're from California. Like, why in the hell would you need a fireplace in a tropical climate? But they pimped out that house. Like, so, but they were seeing all of this, and they were kind of comparing their housing, and they were like, why is it that the white people have better housing than us, and they're essentially our guests in our country?
Yeah.
So they didn't say that to them, but they felt very open to say that to me. And if anything, they kind of put me in a bad spot, because in a way, because I had to kind of, I didn't, but it was kind of like
capitalism.
Explain, right? You know, and keep in mind at that point, I really wasn't as political as I am now.
I forget the quote and who made it, but it's something like, the colonizer will return as the entrepreneur, something like that. So it's very, very similar. So,
yeah, but long story short, I am familiar with Watoto, and again, I just felt like even back then, and I was very apolitical back then, but even then I kind of recognized there seemed to be a lot of affluence with that church that I didn't feel it was appropriate for those kids. But more importantly, it gave them a very skewed view about it would just give the impression that that's what America is, and it will make them feel, oh, I want to live here. I want to be there. And actually, that's what a lot of kids were saying to me was, how can I get to America? How can I live there? And I'm like, you don't want to. Like, like I had to kind of keep it very direct and kind of frank with them, basically being like, America is not the place. And unfortunately, the people who are here are not giving you the fullness of what the country is like. So it is not a place that, in my opinion, you should yearn to go to, especially given how you might be treated, not just from white folks, but other Black folks, especially we see so now too. So, as I think I said this before, like, I think a lot of them had a different mindset during George Floyd. And I said this, they were the first to kind of call me to check in on me to see how I was doing. But that long aside, I haven't had great feelings about this church from the jump, and Max is just kind of confirming. And I'm just saying, as a person who has visited and has connected with the organization in different ways since being here, I can kind of confirm a lot of what he's saying here. So it makes complete sense that this judge, who is a Christian, going to this church in Watoto, has been kind of groomed in a way to kind of think the way that she is, that would influence her position on Israel. So it makes a lot of sense to me that that's what happened with her. And to kind of go into it a little bit more, if you go back in the slide.
Yep.
Here's just a taste of a sermon that Skinner, I believe this is Skinner here,
yes,
that actually preached within the church. So you can just listen to what he says, and we'll talk, and we'll go on.
How many syllables does he have on the word devil? Before we get too far.
I don't think he mentions the devil in this clip, at least in this clip. So,
but I hope we're adding more syllables to words than we need.
Oh, I can't hear it.
Neither can they hear.
Britain left Palestine, which they were looking after, on May the 14th, 1948. And on that day, little 4 or 5'3" David Ben-Gurion, with his lion-like hair, stood up and declared the Jewish nation reborn to be called Israel. For 2,400 years, no Jewish flag had flown over Israel until that day. For 1,900 years, the nation had been out of Israel, scattered, but God fulfilled his prophecy by bringing them back. The greatest sign of the any moment return of Jesus. What is the land in the north? Moscow is exactly due north of Jerusalem. This is Bible prophecy about the times that we are living in, our generation. This is the most dramatic sign that Jesus is about to return.
But whatever.
What's going to happen ahead of us? Israel is that barometer. What happens to Israel is a sign of the end-time scenario. The national rebirth of Israel is the greatest end-time sign we have. The rebirth of Israel tells us that God's plan for the ages is unfolding exactly as He's declared it would, on time. The next event is Jesus is coming back. He will take the church out of the sin-sick world and unleash his wrath against rebellious Israel and the Christ-rejecting Gentile nations. Half of Israel calls themselves secular.
Yeah, this is from their church.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so honestly, I'll be frank, I'm kind of embarrassed that I was involved in these circles for so many years. But at least even then, I kind of recognized there was something up. I couldn't quite clarify it at that time. And now, especially doing a lot more political stuff, I'm more aware of this now. But we've talked about this, you know, like as far as Christian Zionists, they're more dangerous than Jewish Zionists, because you don't hear a Jewish Zionist necessarily evangelizing throughout the world, you know, spreading Judaism in the same way that we see a lot of Christians doing this, and especially in Africa. And, you know, a lot of their teaching is fundamental. It's not based on history. At least for me, like, I was very fortunate, even when I went to Catholic school, that even when I was reading the Bible back then, you know, I was using it in comparison to what was going on in history at the time. So I had a little bit more nuanced view of the Bible even back then. But more often, like, a lot of these evangelists do not often have that education. So they just take the Bible at its words value and just go over there and just promote that, unfortunately.
And not just its words value, their words value. Like, it's all, this is my problem with, like, a lot of spiritualism, and it's all subjective, lofty terms that you can use to mean whatever you want. And you can use it to judge people, usually, for whatever you want. Like, you know, so, like, I'm all for people believing whatever they want to, but to me, it's, like, detrimental a lot of times. Like, and gets in the way of actual, real, factual, concrete things, you know? Like, and they get every historical aspect of this wrong. Like, it's just not great. And then they ignore all the teachings that would, like, counteract what they're talking about. You know? So
the other thing that makes this very dangerous, especially in African culture in general, is in Uganda, there is a heavy emphasis on respect in terms of, you know, elders. Like, for me going over there, I'm considered an elder. So definitely, like, although I had a problem with that in certain aspects, only because, not to say they shouldn't respect me, but it's like, it was the idea that I was the end all. All the knowledge was on me, which is kind of like, no, I don't want that kind of responsibility. Like, I'm coming in to learn from you. So, you know, so that was kind of the stance that I always took, even with, like, the kids that I work with. I always wanted to see myself as a peer, like, they call me uncle. And, like, that was just simply a term of respect for them. So, like, but it also kind of elevated me almost like as father, which in a way I understand, but at the same time was like, I want to be considered more of a peer, that you're able to talk to me in a way that wasn't as formal, so to speak, and the way that you think and the way that you work around me. I didn't want you to, because there's this idea, like, if you're older, then you knew everything. You don't answer back. You just take it for everything what that person says as face value. And that was the kind of danger that I saw, especially in the church, especially where like a white missionary or evangelist will come in and preach the word of God, especially giving themselves as a teacher role. That kind of respect, and unfortunately it'll have to be a white person, you know, and especially given that that white person is from the West, that like, oh, they're kind of refined, they know everything, they're educated, so we have to listen to them. And so unfortunately that's the kind of situation, unfortunately, that they're able to spew.
Well, it's especially when you talk about the Catholic Church has used that like expert power-based nonsense for plenty of years to do terrible things as missionaries.
Right.
But
So it's almost kind of weaponization of the values that Africans, in this case Ugandans, have towards, and I think also like the idea, especially if you're coming from abroad, because many of them understand that you're coming a long way, and the idea that that country at all is like it's a treat for them. So they want to give you like the utmost respect in that, for visiting their home. So they want to treat you accordingly. So it's kind of that traditional, like we say in the Arab world, like we talked about this, like that respect / hospitality is almost kind of weaponized.
Yeah.
Because they use that to their advantage to almost infiltrate and then
they use any of
them
that.
think in a way
Any of it's
that,
a tool.
in this case, benefits them.
Yeah.
So
just like they exploit community, just like they exploit like people's fears, and it's all exploitative in nature, So
but anyway, let's go back to the article with what Max reported. So he goes into Skinner now. Since he founded Watoto in 1984, Skinner has instilled a virulently anti-Arab strain of Christian Zionism in his congregation of 36,000 in Kampala. In a 2021 sermon entitled Israel, the Greatest Sign, Skinner spun together an assortment of cherry-picked biblical verses with potted history to justify Israel's military control over historic Palestine. He punctuated his German with an admonition to his parishioners and Gentiles everywhere. If you bless the Jews, you will be blessed. If you curse the Jews, you will be cursed. Did we play this already?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
That was the one we just played. That apparently file didn't work. I assume it was that Twitter video you put in.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. In his sermon, Skinner also boasted of Watoto's donations to an array of evangelical charities inside Israel for the church's Firm Israel initiative, including some that promote religious conversion. We as a church give a lot of money every year to support God's work in Israel, he stated, beaming with pride, because we know that God has a plan for the nation, and it's the greatest sign of his return. Skinner's eschatological view of history clearly informs Seputende's dissent against the ICJ's ruling on South Africa's genocide case against Israel. Though Uganda's foreign ministry condemned her radical opinion, powerful evangelical figures inside the country with close ties to the presidency held her as a heroine. So this is why, going back before, why I felt like a lot of it was kind of a cover for what they really think. And Max pulled up, if you scroll up, just to read the name, because it's kind of small. So Patience M, and I'm going to pronounce it, I'm sorry, Rabiongo, I guess. So she tweeted. So she said on Instagram, you scroll down, not all heroes wear capes. Julia Seputende has made an historic stand at the ICJ. May God always remember her for her mercy, and may Uganda as a nation always be found on the Lord's side. 2 prayer emojis and the Ugandan flag. So Patience is actually, if you zoom out, Patience happens to be the daughter of Yoweri Museveni, the Ugandan president. The flamboyantly evangelical president of Uganda, whose wife Janet, a close ally of Watoto Church, and fun fact, a lot of my mentors at the time at the ministry I worked at met her and liked her. So, that says something. Is known for her biblical interpretations of history. Frankiaske, oh boy, I should know that name because I have friends by that name, so I'm sorry. A Ugandan constitutional scholar argued that the endorsement of Seputende's ICJ dissent by Museveni's daughter demonstrates the judge's opinion was almost certainly informed by the terms of Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3, the first interpreted by Christian Zionists to mean that anyone who blesses the Jews will be blessed, and was therefore wholeheartedly sanctioned by the Ugandan Pentecostal movement, and I would probably also argue by the Ugandan government. Now, at the helm of the ICJ, Seputende gains the power to break a deadlock vote and may be able to undermine the South African case in a more substantial way than before. With Israel likely to shatter the Gaza ceasefire, time is running out for war crime investigators. But the Ugandan judge appears to be operating on a schedule free from earthly concerns, dictated instead by the end times. So this is Janet. She's
praising Jeebus.
Yeah, she's the first lady in Uganda. So she tweeted, I think she tweeted this in June. I'm delighted to have joined Watoto Church to celebrate 40 years of service to Lord Jesus Christ and the nation of Uganda. I extend my sincere gratitude to Pastors Gary and Marilyn Skinner for stewarding God's work in our nation with grace and excellence. Similarly, I congratulate Pastor Julius and Vernina Riontinio for their leadership and thank retired Archbishop Henry Luke Orumbi for his powerful message and exemplary leadership to the church and nation. Watoto's church's impact over the last 40 years is truly remarkable. The church's dedication to caring for orphans, empowering women, and establishing the Watoto School for Community Leadership is an inspiration to us all. The commitment to practical demonstrations of love and service is a testament to the transformative power of faith in action. With gratitude and admiration for the remarkable work of Watoto Church, I look forward to witnessing its continued positive impact on the lives of many. So, unfortunately, I think it's only going to get worse for the ICJ now. In this case, given Seputende's role as president, and obviously having, I would argue, the government's back in promoting Israel and their genocide in Gaza and soon to be, West Bank. So, any final thoughts before we close on this segment?
No, I mean, it just sounds like more exploitative stuff over there. I mean, it's, been that way for a minute, especially with the Catholic Church in that region. It's one of the ways we control our colonies, and there's plenty of studies, especially from people in the area, talking about, the white man's religion. So, and especially in Uganda, I mean, we've talked about their anti-LGBT stuff and their,
which
there's
again
lots
is
of
influenced heavily by the church.
Yes, and they have radio stations and influence, and prosperity pastors and all that stuff there. It's not great. It's
Right.
not
But
the
again, this is
Sermon
why
on the
we
Mount
say,
churches that
and we talked about
sometimes
this.
pop up.
We did a segment on Christian Zionists, and I know people in this space have talked about them too. But this is why they're more dangerous, because they have money. Well, it's not so much the money, but it's more free flowing, into situations like these, that they're able, in a way, to buy influence. Obviously, like in this case in Uganda, like they're a mega church there, and it's a popular one in order to have, I think they said like 36,000 people. That's for the capital in its own. That's a lot of people. So, so they are making bank there, especially given if the president is there. So, so it's like this idea that they're there, they're having this money, and they're able to raise a lot of money, and they use the kids to do it. And so that's the thing that really makes me upset, is the idea that you're using kids. Now, granted, they're doing it I mean, I have so much trouble saying this, but they're exploiting the kids to raise money to essentially fund a genocide to kill other kids. That's the way I kind of see it. So it's so hard because, again, I used to do stuff like this, and initially I didn't think anything of it. Like, I thought, oh, they're doing good work and all this kind of stuff. But as I said, over the years, I started to question motives in terms of, I think in my mind, it was always like, why couldn't Black people from the West be doing this? Why is it usually always white people who are missionaries? And then, and I'll always argue the ones who usually come from a place of privilege to be able to do stuff like that. So, and I think especially now that I'm more involved in politics now, especially with you, it's becoming intersectional in terms of the religion is almost used to push politics, which unfortunately are kind of shaking up in the global South. So it's very disheartening to me that, again, I used to be in these circles, and at the time, and I will admit my own to it. But I'm very glad in a lot of ways that I learned a lot. And then, even then, I questioned things a lot. And that has actually grown in terms of the more I learned and the more I to make connections, that I was able to kind of be like, no, this isn't what I want. But then using my platform, at least in way I could, and now many of the, I don't want to say children, but many of the young people that I worked with are now adults. So now I can just say, no, this is the actual reality of what things are like, and having a lot more room to be able to say that more openly now. So, but as I said, this story was very personal, which is why I did it. And as I said, I'm so kind of pissed that I didn't make this connection earlier as to why she was voting this way. But given her connection to Watoto and having kind of experienced that church in a small way myself, it totally makes sense as to why she voted the way she did, and ultimately how dangerous that is in terms of the future of Palestine.
Yep. I agree. So, which we've all felt that ICJ stuff was wishful thinking on that anyway, and now it's even harder to get through.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So once again, shout out to Max for doing this report. But reporting on stories like these is why our channel is demonetized. So if you want to continue to help us cover stories like these, if you have a smartphone, please scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can go to the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of that screen there and support us that way. Even as donations as low as $1 will be very helpful for us in terms of, as we said, we're trying to raise money for some of our colleagues, like Angel in the chat, trying to get him new equipment so he's able to, increase his content and make it a lot more reliable. So if you're able to help us with that, we will appreciate it. But of course, we know that money is tight. So the free way that you can support us is liking and subscribing to our channel on content. And please share our content to fight the suppression on YouTube. And make sure you leave a comment. So what do you think of this story regarding Seputende and her connection to this church, which will influence how she votes and views Palestine? Yeah, we're very interested to see what you guys think in terms of that. How a lot of her votes is theologically motivated and not necessarily on justice. And help us get to 3K. We weren't getting there very slowly. We're hoping to hit that number at some point this year. And thanks for watching.
Cool. Before we get to that, Colin, I gotta go pee. So if you could go through some chats, I'll be right back.
Okay.
I tried to hold it in, but
right.
I can't. I gotta go, boy, bro. I gotta go pee.
All right. So while he's doing that, unfortunately, I don't have access to Rumble. So let's see what you guys are saying in YouTube. And we always say, please try and stay on topic. This is going to be the teacher in me. We want to hear what you're thinking and making sure that not only you're paying attention, but we do read your comments on the show. So, this is, and we want to consider this like a point of engagement. So this is our way of engaging with you all. That being said, Natalie in the chat said, is allegory and folk tales passed down by oral tradition for hundreds of years? Exactly. And also keep in mind, a lot of the stories in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, were just rehashes of origin stories in the region, in the Middle East at the time. So that's something they may not necessarily teach you in Sunday school. I learned that actually in high school, funny enough. Jack H said, religion often seems to give people a sense of unearned superiority. Yep, I can agree with that. Natalie said it's straight up mythology. Definitely aspects of the New Old Testament are more or less that myth.
Like, it's also funny to me that we're not taught any of the other mythologies either.
Right.
Like it tends to be very.
Funny enough, even in high school, I compared and contrast other origin stories in the region, which again they didn't have to do. This was at a Catholic school, but they felt it was important to understand. So in a lot of ways, even in that, I do appreciate the Catholic school at least giving us that nuance to kind of have that basis of understanding. And me going to a Jesuit university, having to take theology classes there, and being a theology major myself. So I had to do a lot of this work anyway.
Yeah.
But, so having that understanding that a lot of those stories, yes, is based on allegory. But it was the idea to kind of teach people something about how to operate in life, but also given the context around the people at the time.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily meant to be taken word for word. It's a form of philosophy in a sense, in terms of something like back in the day with the ancient Greeks, when they talked about philosophy, they sat with their students or whatever and debated and talked and debated, and this, that's what they were doing. And that's essentially with the Bible. That's what you should be doing with the Bible too.
A lot of it's like basic health concern stuff at the time, not understanding exactly how diseases and stuff are transferred. So that's all of Leviticus and Deuteronomy and all that crap. Is all rules to live by. So you don't, you're not mixing plants. You're not, there's a lot of that in there. But
right. But even there's often in Leviticus, which if you haven't, I wouldn't recommend. Well, I had to.
One of the least favorites, but
right. But the idea with that is there was a rhyme and a reason for every single law.
At that time, for sure.
There at that time, a lot of it we don't even know or quite understand.
Have you ever read any of the Dead Sea Scrolls stuff that are not the non-canon books?
Sort of. I did in my junior year of high school, especially given they would kind of discover
during that time, Book of Judas and
so they would kind of discover in the 90s when I was in high school, so they were kind of a big deal at the time. So a little bit, but not too much that I can kind of speak on it that much. So
there's a bunch of that.
More quotes here. Kill your egregors. I was kicked out of Sunday school all the time because of too many questions. Yeah, unfortunately.
You and me both, dog. Yep. I just didn't accept diet religion to replace it. Ooh, zinger.
Right. Sean Miller said, the only time I ever went to a church, I got kicked out by the pastor for no reason, just came up and said, you don't belong here.
Well, it's like
that was shit.
I always found it funny that the more people read into stuff, and like even with the spiritual side of it, the more people read into it, the people who know the most about philosophy in general are like, you know,
Right.
like I don't know. Have you ever heard the term the God of the Gaps? Have you heard of this?
No, I saw that in the chat.
Yeah,
actually.
so God of the Gaps it was pinned by, I forget exactly, but it's in reference to, I think, Newton, right? Who, like, if you ever read his, like, how the planets rotated, right? That book he wrote, I forget the name of it, which I should remember it, but it's like at the end of it, he chalked up like why the planets move this way is like, well, that's our creator, right? That's him doing that, right? Which then we found out, okay, it's because of gravity, and then Einstein's work, and then, you know, it's this idea of like you will put stuff up that you do not understand yet fully up to some superstitious, like intangible aspect that you cannot either disprove or prove, right? Like you can't prove a negative. So, which is why I don't try. I just assume it's nonsense in that case. If that's our like bottom line, but that's just me. Again, I'm pretty militant about it, and my apologies for people who want to hold on to their belief systems. I'm not going to tell you to not, although I might a little bit, you know, like, but you know, it's all in love.
So
yes.
Okay, so there are a couple more here. There was a lot here. I guess religion really had a thing for
it does
people in the chat. So Rafat Alavir, this is the exact sort of thing that has soured me regarding religion in general. That being said, anti-theism is inadvisable from a strategic perspective.
Yeah, mainly because so many people believe in it, you know.
Right.
Which I get.
Jacqueline said, but is there a difference between religion and faith? How many people of any religion actually in the depths of their heart believe in the deity they're supposed to be worshiping? Look,
A lot of them don't.
I
certain
will speak
respects.
for myself. I call myself a person of faith. And look, I would argue that I'll say this. A lot of, I think, how I operate in the world, in a lot of ways, is contributed to the faith. And I'm saying faith in a more holistic sense, in terms of, you know, humanity, like treating people well, taking care of them, all of that.
Yeah.
The religion part, I would argue, and especially like in a more traditional sense, like if you go to a Catholic church or whatever, it's more or less the rules in terms of how to operate, in terms of you doing, like, you have to do this, and like if you're lying with scripture and all, and which I argue, I think people focus more on that than the actual actions per se. Like, I think people are more interested in the appearance, especially in the West, of like, but I can also argue that capitalism too has kind of gone in the weeds of that here. Look, I'll say this. I've been in the global South, even in Uganda, like, for example, and like, I see a lot of faithful young men and women there, in terms of they don't have a whole lot. Like, the bind of capitalism, especially in the bush, is non-existent. I will say that. But again, it's the idea of like, they were the most hospitable, they were the most open, they were the most caring people that I've ever met. You know, and I've said this in the Arab world too, like in Morocco and Jordan, where I visited too. Kind of a similar thing. It's funny when you take away that aspect of capitalism, that people act more human. You would think that with more money, that people would act more human, but we tend to isolate ourselves more and kind of give yourself it's almost like here religion is used as a class thing at many times, because it's like, like typically within those circles, not always, but you have to go to this certain type of school, and you have to go to this certain type of job, which can affect like your class. So
see, for me,
I feel like
I think
go ahead.
I have an issue with like words such as faith, especially in the way it's used, because like even with the way you used it, it's something you're not relying on faith with the definition of. You're basing that off of actual real world experiences and objectifiable evidence and observation that you and others have had. Like, to me, that's an important aspect of it. The minute you get into the metaphysical and stuff that you can't necessarily prove and be quantifiable is my issues. But that's just me being extra philosophical about it, Like, if you go look at the teachings of Alan Watts, he would tell all of you you're thinking too hard about it. Just enjoy life and do well with others, and that's about it.
Do well with others. Take care of them as best as you can. Like, that's kind of the basis. Did I need to go to church for that? No.
Not hard. Don't be an asshole.
No.
Done.
But I would argue, for me, like, given the circles I was in, I was able to travel around the world. I was able to meet different people. Like, I was able to have conversations with people. And actually, like, again, in the Arab world, like, they don't have the same taboo in terms of talking about politics and religion that we do over here. They talk about it like they will have debates about Islam with you, like and that's okay. As long as you come in with the understanding, like, we're here to respect you, but kind of like what we're doing now.
I know very little about the teachings of Muhammad. I'm more than willing to like, that was me, even as like my militant atheist self, I'm still willing to like engage with the stories and teachings and whatever. I just don't exclude myself to one of them. I think it was Ricky Gervais that said like an atheist just like a Christian only I'm trying to remember the exact phrase, but like it's like I only believe in one less God than you do, right? Like you don't believe in any of the other ones. There's 99,000 like religious deities that you ignore, So like it's but we're supposed to like, I'm not supposed to know about, Rastafarianism or any of the Nordic religions or the plenty of South American, Native American, like all that stuff is just as applicable as far as moral teachings, as well as the entire history of literature, and movies and television and just general zeitgeist, people. I'm trying to remember. There was another one where it was like morals are decided at the dinner table of the public. It's not really about like, there's no innate morality. It's usually community based in general. Like, and it has to be accepted by the public for it to be that. But again, I've done my digging into the metaphysical there, but like, I think it was Kate that was like, yep, I'm with Watts, don't think. Yep. Like, exactly. Just turn that off. You don't need it. You're trying too hard. Like, I'm with them, But anyway, not to get too derailed into theology, which, reminds me of my childhood arguments.
Yeah, it resonated with the people in the chat, though. So
yes, as it would.
Was worth it.
But anyway, I wanted to bring this last story that I feel like we've looked at a lot of like depressing like aspects of Gaza in the last month, year and a half, 2 years now, it seems. But I think there was some joy this last week to kind of look at, and I wanted to bring that. So this is Taraksi Hajjaj over at Mondo Weiss. Sheer Post is co-reporting. But they write, in historic return March, thousands of Palestinians arrive in northern Gaza, which there will be caveats to the joy. And I hate to be that guy about it, but I think someone has to. But a sea of people streamed through both lanes of Al Rashid Street, the coastal road on the western Gaza Strip, designated for the return north as part of the ceasefire arrangement between Israel and Hamas, as thousands upon thousands of people marched on foot in the west to the east. Vehicles were lined up bumper to bumper and allowed to cross after inspection on Salah al-Din Street. These were the scenes in Gaza on Monday as tens of thousands of Palestinians who had been displaced in the southern Gaza Strip since the beginning of the war began to return home. So I think we need visuals, right? To kind of get the full grasp of this. Right? This is what this looked like, Care Bear. So that is the people literally marching. And like, this is, I mean, people in the comments were like, this is post-apocalyptic footage. Yeah. You know, like that's bad. You know, I mean, I'm like, this is what the people get to come back to, is this. Now, we know the Palestinian people are resilient and will rebuild whatever they can if they are able. And that's my worry, is the if.
Right.
You know, I feel like they're, for lack of a better term, resetting the shooting gallery, you know? And I hope and that that's not going to be the case, you know? But I did find this kind of heartwarming to some degree. But to continue a bit, families who spoke to Mondo Weiss expressed their joy and feelings of hope upon crossing into northern Gaza, where what remained of their homes was waiting for them. The residents of Gaza City waited for their displaced relatives coming from the south, raising Palestinian flags and victory signs and welcoming the returnees. We endured everything throughout the war and stayed strong, but we cried more when we met our loved ones after coming home. Ahmad Hussam, a returnee to northern Gaza, told Mondo Weiss. So these were the flags they were talking about, right? Raised above the people returning home. Great artwork that I used in the thumbnail. But I will let you look at the footage it's based off of, you know. So, still a ton of people. Like, I mean, that's got to be, definitely 1,000 or so, even in this picture, you know. I mean, I might be overcounting that, but definitely quite a bit. But those guys climbed up there and put up the flag. So good for them. But since last Friday night, families had been removing their tents in southern Gaza and heading to the nearest point in the Nitsarim axis, waiting to make the journey to return to their homes in North Gaza. Many had been camped out in the cold overnight so that they would be the first to be allowed through. According to the ceasefire agreement, the displaced were supposed to return to their homes in the northern part of Gaza on Sunday morning, but Israel obstructed their return under the pretext an Israeli captive, Arbel Yehuda, had not been among the 4 female soldiers released by Hamas on Saturday. Yehuda is not held by Hamas, but the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. So this is where I see this deal kind of being manipulable, right? Well, yeah. I think it also said when we covered it not that long ago that they had to provide a list of all remaining hostages, like dead or alive, pretty much. You know?
Yeah.
Which all they had to do is dispute that. Most of the people we've talked to feel like in the second stage of this ceasefire is when they're going to pretty much, dissolve it. So we'll see very quickly here in the next couple of weeks whether that's the case. I think the first stage is like a month or so, right? And we've already had about a week and a half of it. So,
right.
We'll see in the next 2 weeks or so, probably, how that's looking. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, on a lighter note, a rose from me and a cup of coffee from her, a romantic morning in the home of freed prisoner Mohammed Amar Zaid on his first day after 20 years of absence. So we'll let him speak a bit. Praise Allah, thank you. I used to bring Abdullah a rose every day when I returned from work. It has been 20 years and 5 months since I last brought her this rose. And today she offered me a cup of coffee and I gave her the rose after 20 years. Praise be Allah, Allah blessed us and we were reunited. Praise Allah, she makes me the coffee and we drink it together and I offer the rose as an expression of my love to her. Just some nice little romance amongst the rubble, So,
yeah.
And just appreciating the little things. But by Sunday, local media outlets reported that a settlement had been reached. The Israeli captive would be handed over early before next Saturday, when the regularly scheduled exchange of prisoners is supposed to take place. I dreamt of this moment every night. The joy is palpable among the crowds flooding northern Gaza, returning to their homes after 15 months of displacement. Fatima Abd Rabo, 44, carries a bag on her back and walks northward. She knows that her house in the Jabalia area has been destroyed, and that she will sleep next to it amid the rubble, yet she cannot contain her elation that she survived 15 months of genocidal war and that her children were returning with her. So scenes such as this were a part, people taking their cats back to Gaza, which I think is just very sweet. Look at the kitties! I love them! So I do think that there's, they definitely enjoy their kitties over there. I think there is some significance there with that. I don't know specifically, but I know plenty of families over there that do. But any thoughts so far?
I'm going to save it to the end.
Okay. Well, let's keep going then.
I do have thoughts.
So, my feelings today are indescribable. It's like a weight has lifted from our shoulders, Fatima said. Even though we don't know what we will do when we reach our home, we are happy we can rebuild anything as long as we are in our land and in good health. I dreamt of this moment every night, she continues as she walks. Thank God that we lived to see it. This time, I will not leave my home, no matter what happens, Fatima vows. Fatima and her family have lived in a tent in Khan Yunis for several months. Although she was heading towards her destroyed home, she could not carry all her belongings with her on foot, so she left half her belongings in Khan Yunis, including pillows, blankets, or mattresses to sleep on. We carried half of our belongings to ease the difficulty of the journey. We know that we will suffer in the north and that we will sleep on the rubble, but we are happy because we will rebuild, she says. So, this is the kind of things that she's talking about. Literally children carrying children on their way to North Gaza. Again, streams of people. I saw a man rowing his boat along this shore, right, with their belongings. I saw a man carrying his father, right? Definitely striking imagery from the area. But from the eastern direction of the Gaza Strip via Salah al-Din Street, cars crowd the entrance to the Netzarim axis. Akram Safi, 36, sits in his car while his wife and children in the back seat, his young daughter holding a torn piece of paper from a notebook. The page reads the words, "Returning to Gaza, the proud." Akram and his family waited in the car for 2 nights until they could enter the north. "I will meet my family as soon as I arrive, my brothers and sisters. We have not seen them since the beginning of the war," Akram told Mondo Weiss. "We thank God that we are returning today. We have had enough suffering inside the displacement camps. There is no pain that compares to the pain of being deprived of your home, and there's no happiness that compares to returning to it." He adds, twin brothers meet in northern Gaza for the first time in a year, right? Just in a similar vein, So, definitely some lovely moments during this, but I mean, the fact that they've been separated for so long is kind of crazy to me. But got a little bit more, I think. This is literally a Palestinian kissing the soil of Gaza on arrival.
يومين على التوالي واحنا محصرين بالطخ والعذاب والموت وضلينا صامدين لما رجعنا على اراضينا ورجعنا على غزه.
But yeah, I mean, really harrowing stuff to me. So the first phase of the ceasefire agreement with Israel stipulates that the Israeli army must withdraw from residential areas in Gaza. The withdrawal began from the Netzarim axis, separating northern and southern Gaza, retreating to the border with Egypt and the buffer zone around the Strip. After the first phase, which will last 42 days, 2 more phases are expected to be implemented with the aim of ending the war permanently. Negotiations for the second phase are set to begin on the 16th day of the current phase. So we should probably be seeing those any day now. But thoughts, Care Bear? What do you got? Hit me.
Let's start with the positive. And
yes, I know. I hate it. I know.
And then we'll dial it back.
Yeah.
Not dial it back. But we have to
ease
get
the edges a bit. Yeah, I know.
I said this, I feel like it was last week or 2 weeks ago. I am not going to take the joy away from any Palestinian who wants to celebrate returning home. I'm not going to do that. So they have the right to do so in however they choose to see fit. And if that's what gives them pleasure, then that's their right.
Yeah.
But we all know this is going to be short-lived. So this is just a temporary respite for what we've been hearing is going to continue. And given what we know, what Netanyahu has said, that they plan to resume fighting really after this phase, this first one, given what we know now of how even in the ICJ we have a president who is in the hand of Israel by way of Christianity. It's kind of sad to say that, but it's not even like AIPAC and all of them. It's like the church, like it's going to continue. And I say that because right now it's just the idea of releasing hostages. There's no talk about rebuilding schools. Yeah, they're going to be rebuilding their homes, but with what? There's no talk of international support of rebuilding. There's no talk of as I say all the time, reparations, yes, for the Palestinians. There's no talk of rebuilding infrastructure so that, and we've talked about this according to reports, I think it's going to take like, I want to say 80 years to rebuild it to a point where I think the region in that area is livable. 80 at least. So, and that would include having to find people who are lost in the rubble, and God knows how long that would take. So it doesn't give me. So yes, I can be happy for them in the moment, but in the long term, I'm worried because the fighting is going to resume, and Trump has basically promised that.
Yeah.
So, and I don't have my phone, but I saw someone on Instagram post it, and I'm going to forget the words exactly because we're going to hear now, oh, Trump is shit on Gaza, like blah, blah, blah. You know, all the liberals who pretended to care about Gaza for the moment and basically kept quiet.
Yep.
Are now going to complain about Trump, and I'm sure we're going to hear the word genocide a lot more
often.
frequently in the mainstream media now. Now it's safe to say it. But the reality is we have to put the blame on the Democrats who had the power to, like people were saying, at minimum, minimize. I will argue at most stopping it and actually doing the things that they needed to do in order for this to be truly the end, if they were brave enough and had the will to do it. But they didn't because they care more about their donors than they do about people, I would argue, and especially people who do not live. I would argue they don't care about us, but because people are far enough away that you don't have to make the focus on them anyway. So it's bittersweet for me. Like, I understand the joy and the release that they're feeling right now, and I totally get that, and they deserve to have that. But as the saying goes, you gotta, if you stay ready, you have to stay ready. And so I say that with caution. Like, enjoy the brief respite, but more is on its way. And I hate saying that. But I mean, but we speak truth here, and that is the truth.
Well, I've definitely been worried as far as, this is concerned. I'd love to be able to have them have their land back and then some, but I worry that after the second stage of a ceasefire, it's right back to where we were. And, not a lot of safety in rubble,
Right.
So I would just like to, take precautions to where if you need to get out, do so, but also I completely understand staying. So
right.
That's a tough choice.
Right. But I think for many people, and I think this is a justification that they're making, I'd rather die at home than anywhere else. And if they're wanting to make that stance, they have the right to do that.
Yeah.
So
I
think honestly,
I'd rather you be a warrior later than a martyr today.
Honestly, for many of I think honestly for many of them, I would like to think that many of them are aware of what's coming, but it's still the idea of like, we don't want to die in a place that's unfamiliar to us.
No,
We'd
I
rather die
I
in a
get it.
place that, you know, that at least they're able to make a final stand and be like, I want to die at home, which to me, yeah, as you said, I understand completely.
Yeah.
So,
Which I'd love to be wrong too. Feel free to prove me wrong that this will work out. So, but as we see in the Gaza, like, I don't know how, you know, now the West Bank is going to get the full force of it, I think. So in the meantime, and, you know, there's tons of stuff about Greater Israel is definitely being more of a thing. So if not the Strip, it's going to be Lebanon and Syria and the West Bank and, you know, possibly even parts of Egypt coming up. So we'll see. We'll keep you informed, but talking about it is almost definitely why we're demonetized. You can go to ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork, scan that QR code on your screen, or, you know, go in the little doobly-doo down below and find the link to that. But, you know, we get it. Times are tough. Not everyone has the money to spare. So just like and subscribe. Takes you 2 seconds, hitting those buttons. Share this with your friends and leave a comment. Let us know what you think. You know, are we too, should we just be positive about it? Let us know. You know, sorry we're cynical. My apologies. But otherwise, thanks for watching. You know, not that I should apologize for it, but whatever. Anyway, that's our show, Care Bear. We did it.
Yeah.
We did it. I know Indy sent me a thing.
I put that up already, so
I don't know if it updates that quickly.
Yeah.
I wish it did.
Right.
That would be nice. But anyway, I have it.
Refresh? Oh yeah.
Yeah, I can just pull it up.
Okay. So this is our schedule. So it's gonna be kind of odd because we kind of started from Saturday. So we're gonna go into next week as we head into February. So tomorrow night, all times
Who are
are
these
Eastern
people?
Standard Time. Oh, thank you, Sean.
Aw, Sean. You're so sweet to us, Sean. You know, appreciate it. Be
Thank
more
you for
like
another
Sean,
great show.
people.
Well, thank you
Do
for
that.
watching. So
Yeah,
thank
you're here
you.
every time.
Appreciate it.
In the trenches with us.
So tomorrow night, oh, by the way, Monday through Thursday, AM Red Cup simulcast from at 10. That will be on X/Twitter only. Tomorrow night, subject to change. Snow Himbo streams at 9. Friday at 10, the Independent Review. That's also an X Twitter exclusive show. Tomorrow, no, not tomorrow night. Friday night is Angel in the Afternoon, followed by American Edition Clip Show at 10:30. Nothing on Saturday. I know it says on the news that was from this past weekend.
Yeah.
So that's our open day.
And he said he
Sunday,
put a tweet in the chat. Not sure where that's at. But anyway, continue.
What?
No, he just said, look at the tweet I sent. I'm like, oh, where? You know?
Sunday, Pro Wrestling Talk with Angel and Wishy Perfect at 8. Followed by How Do We Miss That with you and Indy at 10. Followed by Boats at midnight. That will be on the Ocho and Rumble only. Monday night, the Maple Files with Himbo and Yeti at 8. There will be, is there a American Edition this week? Next week?
Next week, I think so. Jesse didn't do this
Yeah.
Tuesday, so it should be next week.
Yeah, so yeah, he'll be live, doing a live show next Tuesday, and we'll be back here next Wednesday night.
Yeah. Well,
That's our schedule. And like I said,
Same bat time.
any changes?
Same bat channel. Any changes? Go to Twitter. I didn't. It's fine. But yeah, go to Twitter. Make sure you got us on there. Go to Substack. Make sure you got us on there. All the links can be found at indienewsnetwork. You can also find those links in the description below. Anything else? Shout out to the people over on Rumble. Go Start. Earn Demure. Learn Demure. I hope that's how you pronounce that. Holding it down over there. Being not lizard people, using those thumbs. Shout out to everyone, chat. Make sure you have a good time. You know, try not to be completely depressed. You know, I know it's tough. Anything else you want to add? I think that's it.
Oh, good. That's it. We're good.
Cool. Well, as people know by now, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week, everyone.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.